The border shown here is called a Gothic border. You'll see it carved in two different styles. When laying out this border, typically we use the same dimensions as we used in our borders earlier. 2 millimeters, 4 millimeters, 4, 4, 4, and 2. But for this demonstration, I've made my boxes a little bit larger so you're more easily able to see them. So I've used my T-square and ruler, and I've laid out the following pattern on my board. I've chosen 3 millimeters, 6, 6, 6, 6, and 3 millimeters, and then divided them into 6 millimeter squares all the way across my board. Choose whatever size works for you as you're practicing. I'd suggest 2, 4, 4, 4, 4, and make them into 4 millimeter squares all the way across your board. Notice on this practice board, and for demonstration purposes, I've darkened the lines to make 4 by 4 squares. So I've darkened this line here to show me a 4 by 4, and the same right up to here. So that's just so you're more easily able to see how to draw out this pattern. So here's what I'm going to do, working inside this 4 by 4 square. Outside is 4 by 4, and then inside we have a 2 by 2 square. To draw the Gothic border, I'm going to start on one corner of my 2 by 2 square and draw a curve up to the outer corner of the 4 by 4. And then from there down to the other corner. Repeat that on the other side, from the inside of the 2 by 2 square to the 4 by 4, and the same over here. Now for the next one, do the same thing except run it in the opposite direction. So from here, the corner of my 2 by 2 down to there and up, and the same from here over and up. And then once more, the same thing here. These lines don't have to be perfect. They're just guidelines for you to follow. So that's the method you use to draw out the basics for the Gothic border. Now let's go ahead and I'll show you how to carve this. I'll start by doing one of these at a time. As you can see here, we've got outside chips, inner chips surrounding the 2 by 2, and then the flip-flop motion on the inside. So let's start on the outside. Here's a very narrow part of the chip, so don't put your knife into the wood very deeply at all. And then here is where you get your depth on your chip. Notice again my knife is in the first position, thumb, knuckle, and knife blade forming the consistent angle. Then from here, plunge your knife down in to get the depth and draw the knife out right out to the corner. And I'll do the same thing right here. Shallow to deep. Turn your board. Deep. And draw the knife out. Now to take out those chips, we'll start here, come across. Here's the wide part of the chip, so that's where it gets the deepest. Shallow. There's the deep part, and draw your knife out right to the corner. Do the same thing for the other side. Turn your board. There's a shallow part. Get your depth right there at the widest part of the chip and draw it out. If it doesn't, it's hung up just a little bit, it's across the grain cut most likely. Right there is with the grain. There's a deep part to take out the rest of that chip. Now let's do the inside portion, which is around that 2x2 square on the center. I'd like to carve away from my previous chips, so I'm going to make this cut first, starting at the corner of the 2x2, shallow. There's a deep part, and right up to the corner. Turn your board. There's a deep part, and draw it up right to the corner. Now as you make these cuts, try to follow right along the edge of your previous cut so you get a nice edge along the top. There's the deep part, and draw it out. Okay, now we'll take those out. I'm going to follow right along the line of that 2x2 chip. There's the first part of it. Now that one doesn't want to come out. I'm going to leave it for now and make this cut, plunge down to get my depth, and draw the knife out right to the end. Okay, now that previous one didn't come out, so most likely it's this cut across the grain right down in there. The deepest part of the chip is where it will hang up. Okay, so just a little bit right there, and it comes out real nicely. So the same thing on the other side. To take out that chip, here's my first cut. And we'll make the second cut. Plunge it right down to the bottom and draw it out right to the end. Okay, that one's hung up a little bit, so don't pry it out. Instead, take your knife, enter back into the cut, and it should come right out. Okay, I've done all the outside chips and the chips around the 2x2. Now we'll do the flip-flop motion and finish up this. Put my knife down into the previous chip I just made and just draw it right out to the point. Flip over to the first position with your knife and draw it out to there. There's a previous video on the flip-flop motion. If you don't recall this, you can look at that to refresh your memory. Just turn your board, work your way right around the outside. Doing the flip-flop. There it is, the first of the Gothic border. Now if I were doing this around the edge of a plaque or a box where I had many of these to do, I would do more than one at a time. I would do a whole series of cuts at a time, and I'll show you how to do that with these two right here. So just imagine that I'm going around the whole box. I would do this along the entire length of the box. Here's how I do it.